What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue here with my 2024 college football predictions for the upcoming 2024 season. The Florida State Seminoles are up next. Of course, the Florida State Seminoles were definitely a very big surprise last year. Not really just because of the roster, but just definitely the overall record, finishing an undefeated regular season, then of course winning it all in the ACC championship last year as well. My thoughts on them for 2024, this is definitely not going to be the same kind of roster that they had last year. I mean, obviously, do lose Jordan Travis at quarterback. They also lose Trey Benson, I think a running back or maybe a wide receiver there, but they lose a lot of talent from last year. But this team still added some pieces in the transfer portal. I still think they're going to be really talented and probably the favorites to win it all in the ACC once again. So I think this team is going to be pretty good. They do bring in DJ Uiagalelei, the transfer coming over from Oregon State. Also has experience at Clemson, so he does have a lot of experience, but he hasn't had a great career, so we'll see how that goes. I mean, offensively, I think they're going to be pretty good, but then defensively, I think they're also going to be pretty good. So again, I think Florida State is probably one of the favorites to win the conference once again. So let's get to the schedule here for 2024. This is the schedule here for Florida State. Again, they were 13-1 last year in 2023. Again, won the ACC championship, and that one loss, of course, coming in the Orange Bowl last year. So this is the schedule. Let's go game by game now and give you a record prediction here for the Seminoles for 2024. First game of the season is against Georgia Tech. Of course, this game will be in Ireland. This game will be a Week 0 game on August 24th. Georgia Tech seems like a program that's heading in the right direction. They're coming off a pretty good year last year, made it to a bowl game. Georgia Tech also has a good amount of production coming back on the offense, but I do have a lot of concerns about Georgia Tech's defense. Don't know how good they're going to be on that side of the football, but I think Florida State, they're definitely the better team here in this one. I know it's a neutral site game. Anything can happen, but I think I'm going to go with the Seminoles here to knock off Georgia Tech here to start out the year. So I think Florida State does get the win here in Dublin, Ireland. They beat Georgia Tech here in a close one. Maybe it's a close game in the first half, but I think second half the Seminoles will pull away, and I think Florida State starts off 1-0 here with a win over Georgia Tech. And then they actually get a bye week here. In week number, actually, they don't get a bye week here in week number 1. I actually think they get a bye week. No, they don't actually get a bye week here, between week 1 and week number 2. They do play Boston College, though, here at home on September 2nd on a Monday night, of course, on Labor Day. This will be a home game here for Florida State, their second straight ACC conference game. Boston College actually was very competitive last year against Florida State in the first half. I don't really see that game kind of being played out once again here this year. I think Florida State comes out pretty fired up for this one. I think they do beat Boston College here pretty easily. Plus, the Eagles do have a first-year head coach. I don't know how good this team is going to be, but they do have a good amount of production coming back on offense, so maybe their offense is good. But I think Florida State has a more talented roster, and they do beat Boston College here, and they do get the win, and that puts their record at 3-0. They do beat Memphis here as well. I know Memphis is a pretty good group of 5 team, but I think Florida State either way should still go out here and take care of business against the Tigers, and that puts their record here at 3-0. Next game is at home against California here on September 21st. One of the newcomers, of course, coming up in the conference this year. Cal actually was a pretty decent team last year. They did make it to a bowl game, so I do expect a pretty good fight here for Cal in this one, but I don't think it will be enough. I think Florida State definitely has a more talent advantage in this one. So that being said, I think Florida State wins this one fairly easily, and I think they improved to 4-0 here on the season with a win over Cal. Next game is on the road here at SMU on September 28th. Another one of those newcomers coming up here in the conference this year. This is definitely not going to be an easy game. I mean, it's on the road here at SMU. This is one of the first road games here for Florida State. This is not a very tough place to play, but I think SMU definitely will be very competitive in this game. I think SMU might have a chance to probably be a top 25 team this year. They might not be the same team as they were from last year, but this game is on the road. I do expect a pretty tough one here for Florida State, but I think in the first half it will be a close one, but I think the second half, I think the Seminoles find ways to figure things out, and I think they do pull away here from the Mustangs, and I think they win here on the road and beat SMU on September 28th. So that puts their record now at 5-0. Next game is a big one against Clemson here at home on October 5th. Of course, DJ Uiagalelei going up against his former team. So this will be a homecoming here for, DJ Oagale here. This should be a very interesting game. The game was really close last year. Obviously, a revenge game for the minds of Clemson, but this is obviously a tough one to call just because the Seminoles are playing at home in this one. These are two very talented teams. If it was on the road at Death Valley for Clemson, I would definitely choose the Tigers here to get revenge. But with it being on the road for them, and Florida State playing at home, I think Florida State does win this one in a close game. It does go into the fourth quarter, just because they're playing at home. Home field advantage will favor the difference in this one. So I'm going to go with Florida State here to knock off Clemson, and that puts their record now at 6-0. They get their first bye week of the season before playing on the road here at Duke. This game will be on a Friday, of course. They do play the Blue Devils here on the road. Duke probably not going to be the same team as they were from last year. Mike Elko, of course, now gone to Texas A&M. New head coach for this Blue Devil team, but it is on the road. You never know, but I think Florida State coming out of the bye week, that does help them out just a little bit. I think Florida State does win this one fairly easily, even though it's on the road. So again, I think Duke is not going to be the same team as they were from last year, and definitely Florida State has a more talented roster than Duke does. So I think Florida State wins that game on the road. And that puts their record here at 7-0. And then they get ready for a big-time road game here against Miami on October 26th. So they got back-to-back road games here with Duke and Miami. These are not very tough back-to-back road games, but playing on the road at Miami will be very tough. You look at this Miami team, they're definitely one of the contenders to probably win the ACC this year, and maybe even a playoff contender. I kind of don't want to go that far with Miami, but, you look at this Miami team, they've added some pieces in the transfer portal. Cam Ward coming over at quarterback should be very interesting. So this will be a very interesting game. I think the crowd will be fired up, obviously, for this one just because it's a rivalry game. And this is a tough one to call. I mean, it's on the road in a very tough place to play. Miami does have the home field advantage, and I think that's what I'm going to go with here. So I think Miami does give Florida State their first loss of the season. And I think the Hurricanes also give the Seminoles, or actually they get revenge on the Seminoles from last year's game. The game was a 7-point loss for Miami. And I think Miami does win this one here. So I got Florida State losing their first game of the season. That puts their record here at 7-1. And then after that, it's North Carolina here at home on November the 2nd. This will be a home game here for Florida State. Not very that high on the Tar Heels this year. They lost a good amount of production, from last season. Of course, Drake May gone as well. I feel like, this will be an easy win here for Florida State. I know the Tar Heels could be very explosive on offense, but again, I'm just not really that high on the Tar Heels. They're going to be really young this year, and I think Florida State does win this one fairly easily. So I think Florida State does get a bounce-back win over North Carolina after that loss to Miami on the road, and then it really gets tougher here for Florida State. They go on the road to play Notre Dame on November the 9th. So this will be another tough test here on the road for Florida State. I think Notre Dame's actually going to be a really good team this year. They could potentially be a top 10 team. I've been seeing some people put them in the top 5 as well, but I don't think the Fighting Irish are definitely like a top 5 team, but they're just in there, maybe inside the top 10 and maybe inside the top 15 as well. This is a very tough road game. It's a very tough place to play, and it's definitely one of those upset alert type games. If Florida State was probably ranked in the top 5 or maybe top 10 by this point, I think Notre Dame pulls off an upset here in this one. I think it's going to be a very tough game here for Florida State. I think the crowd will be fired up for this game as well at Notre Dame, and I think Notre Dame fans will lead this Notre Dame team to victory. So I think Florida State does lose their second game here on the road at Notre Dame. So that puts their record at 8-2, and then they take care of business against Charleston Southern, and that puts their record here at 9-2. And they actually get a bye week before playing Charleston Southern, which is a really weird spot for a bye week. You like to have that bye week right before the Notre Dame game, to be honest, if you're a Florida State fan. And then after that, the final game of the season is at home against Florida on November 30th. I don't think Florida is going to be really bad this year. I mean, they do have a talented roster, and again, we just talked about Florida, maybe from yesterday in the LSU video. Florida has a very tough schedule. It really comes down to their tough schedule. If they can get through this tough schedule, Florida could definitely be a very talented team. This game right here, though, I think Florida State both of these teams are pretty even. If it was on the road at Gainesville, I definitely would choose Florida in this one. But with it being in Tallahassee, I think Florida State does win this one just because of home field advantage. But it's obviously a rival game. You never know what can happen. But I like Florida State here in this one just because they're playing at home. And I think they do beat the Gators here in the final game of the regular season here in rivalry weekend on November 30th. So my official prediction for Florida State for 2024 is 10-2. I think that's a pretty fair prediction here for Florida State, but there are some games on here where they can definitely slip up in. That Georgia Tech game in Dublin, Ireland won't be easy there to start out the year in week number 0. And then that Clemson game, they could definitely slip up in that game. So if they lose 2 of those games, they could probably go 8-4, which would definitely be a disappointment for Florida State fans. But I think Miami and Notre Dame are pretty reasonable losses here just because they're both on the road, and they're obviously very tough games to call just because both rosters I think are pretty even between those two teams as well. So that is my official prediction for Florida State. Again, my official prediction for them is 10-2 for 2024. So let me guys know what you think about Florida State. What do you think their record will be for 2024? Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports Channel.